You know, sometimes the most exciting journeys are the ones that kind of take us into the heart of the unknown. And today's deep dive, it's doing exactly that, taking us straight into the Mad Max universe.
Buckle up.
Yeah, I know you've been wanting this one
Oh, yeah.
for a while, and I can tell you it's going to be a wild ride.
You're right about that. This isn't your typical action franchise, even
Yeah.
though visually, it looks like it. It's got the car chases, explosions, all that adrenaline-pumping action.
Yeah.
But it's also like this fascinating allegory, for what we're dealing with right now
Yeah.
as a society.
I know. You're probably thinking action movies, really. But trust me on this one.
Yeah.
The Mad Max films are more than just explosions, car chases. Like, they're a window into this possible future, one that feels increasingly real with, every news report about climate change, resource scarcity, even just social unrest.
Exactly. These films, they're entertaining, yeah, but they're also thought-provoking. And honestly, a little bit scary in how relevant they've become.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. For those of you who need a quick refresher, the Mad Max franchise, it kicked off with Mad Max, 1979.
Mel Gibson.
Starring Mel Gibson. We're thrown into this world already on the brink, where civilization is crumbling faster than a rusty fender.
It's a world where survival is like a full-time job. The government's gone, resources are dwindling, and, well, the remnants of humanity, they're fighting for every scrap.
And it's fascinating to see how this franchise evolved over time. Each film kind of reflects the anxieties of the era it was released in, almost like a cinematic time capsule. You've got like the full descent into chaos with Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, 1981, then this glimmer of hope for rebuilding in Beyond Thunderdome, 1985. And finally, the all-out fight for freedom, survival in 2015's Fury Road.
And, we can't forget the critical acclaim. Fury Road, huge success, 6 Oscars.
Wow.
But beyond the awards, what's really impressive is how these films, spanning decades, continue to resonate with audiences. They tap into these universal fears and hopes that are becoming increasingly relevant in our world.
Yeah, it's a bit like the world has caught up with Mad Max, hasn't it?
It has.
The films have always been about survival, the search for a better future, the choices we make in the face of, unimaginable odds. And those themes are more relevant than ever today.
Yeah. You're right. It's that potent mix of, adrenaline pumping action, but then allegory, that makes this franchise so captivating. On the surface, you have these incredible practical stunts, minimal CGI, these really gritty, realistic action sequences, especially those iconic chase scenes.
I know. I love how they go for those real-world effects.
Yeah.
It's so immersive.
And that grittiness, that tangible reality, it does something important. It grounds the allegory.
Yeah.
It makes the deeper messages about survival and society hit even harder because they're playing out in this world that feels terrifyingly real.
You're right. You're not just watching a movie, you're experiencing it. You can practically taste the dust, feel the heat of the desert.
And that wasteland, that's not just a backdrop.
Yeah.
That's a character in itself, shaping everything, everyone who dares to inhabit it.
Think about how you would feel living in that environment. The constant struggle for resources, the isolation. It makes you question how much of our own humanity we'd be willing to sacrifice just to survive.
Yeah.
Do you think that the wasteland creates the monsters, or does it just reveal the monsters that were already there?
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? To think that the environment we create, it can shape us, even break us.
Yeah.
In ways we can't even imagine. And I think that's where things get really interesting with Mad Max. It's not just about those physical challenges this world, right? It's about the emotional, societal challenges, too.
Yeah, exactly. The wasteland, it's like this breeding ground for isolation, desperation, that primal, dog-eat-dog mentality, just to survive, just to make it to the next sunrise.
You see it in Max, our reluctant hero. He's a man stripped bare by loss, driven by this primal instinct just to survive.
He's almost like a ghost, isn't he?
Yeah.
Wandering through this wasteland, haunted by what he's lost, carrying this weight of grief, trauma.
Yeah, and yet, despite that initial, detachment, we see these glimmers of change in him, particularly in Fury Road. He starts as a captive.
Yeah.
Almost like a resource himself for a Morton Joe's War Boys. With their, blood transfused.
Oh, yeah. Talk about adding insult to injury. Right.
Right.
He's already lost everything. And now they're literally draining the life out of him.
Exactly. But it's through his reluctant alliance with Furiosa that something shifts within him. He's drawn into her fight, her hope, right? Yeah. For something more than just existing.
And Furiosa is something else entirely. She's a force of nature. shattering that tired old damsel in distress trope. She's taking charge, leading this rebellion against Immortan Joe, all for this chance to find this like mythical green place, this haven in this desolate world. It makes you wonder, what does hope even look like in a world like that? What would be worth fighting for when everything seems lost?
Right. And Furiosa is such a brilliant example of how action films, they can redefine these female characters. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's leading the charge. What message do you think that sends, especially to female viewers,
Yeah.
who are used to seeing women portrayed, well, very differently in this genre?
She's a true survivor, but more importantly, I think she's the symbol of resistance. She's fighting for a future where others don't have to endure the same kind of, oppression that she has. She challenges Immortan Joe's control, his exploitation of women, and in doing so, I think she becomes this beacon of hope in this otherwise bleak landscape.
Yeah, and she does it all with such fierce determination, such incredible strength. She's easily one of the most memorable and empowering characters, I think, in cinematic history.
Yeah.
And then you have Immortan Joe, man, his war boys,
Right.
representing that dark side of power and desperation.
Oh yeah, talk about a contrast, right? You've got Immortan Joe, this larger-than-life figure, hoarding resources, controlling the water, ruling through fear and intimidation, and then the war boys. These young men, almost brainwashed, willing to die for his twisted vision of glory. It's a terrifying thought, but it's also like this stark reminder of how easily power structures can exploit people's vulnerability. They're yearning for something to believe in.
And that's, where the allegory, I think, deepens. Immortan Joe, he represents how power, especially in times of scarcity, it corrupts. He controls the means of survival, right?
Right.
And he uses that power to manipulate, exploit, and just dehumanize those around him.
It's like he's created his own twisted religion
Right.
around water, with himself as like the deity.
Exactly. And the war boys.
Yeah.
With their shaved heads, the white body paint, this almost religious fervor, they highlight how desperation, right, combined with this lack of alternatives, it can lead to blind obedience and fanaticism. Think about how often we see that happen in real life, where, people will cling to anything, even a destructive ideology, if they believe it offers them security or a sense of belonging.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world like that, stripped bare, what would motivate you to keep fighting? What values would you hold on to? And what lines would you just refuse to cross?
It's a good question. And, and we can't talk about Mad Max Fury Road without addressing those feminist themes. Because they're woven into the fabric of the film.
Absolutely. At first glance, you see these women, the wives, right?
Yeah.
Being held captive, treated as property, almost a resource themselves.
Right. But very quickly, the film subverts that expectation. These women, they're not passive victims. They're fighting back for their freedom, their agency, their right to control their own bodies, their own destinies.
And it's Furiosa who embodies that fight.
Absolutely. She's the one orchestrating the escape, right? Challenging that whole established order. And through her actions, the film highlights, the strength, the resilience of women, even when they're facing this unimaginable oppression.
Fury Road really sparked a lot of conversation about its feminist message. And for good reason, right? I mean, it reframes this whole power dynamic. It challenges those traditional gender roles we see in action cinema and beyond. I mean, how often do you see a female character leading the charge in a dystopian action film like this?
Yeah, and it's not just about the action, is it? It's about sparking these larger conversations.
Yes.
About our world, our values, the choices we make.
So back to our initial question, is Mad Max action or allegory? I think it's safe to say it's a powerful blend of both. I mean, you've got these mind-blowing stunts, these adrenaline-fueled sequences that keep you on the edge of your seat, but then, woven through every frame is this examination of human nature, societal breakdown, the fight for survival.
Yeah, it's this potent reminder that even in, the darkest of times, even when we're faced with these unimaginable challenges, there's still this flicker of hope, this potential for change.
And that's what makes Mad Max so enduring, right? It doesn't give us these easy answers. It doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of a world on the brink, but it also reminds us that even in the wasteland, humanity, we find a way to endure, to resist, and maybe, just maybe, to rebuild.
It's interesting to consider that whole concept of the green place in Fury Road, this almost mythical haven, this symbol of like a more balanced, sustainable way of life. It's a powerful reminder that even in this world that's been ravaged by our own mistakes, there's still that yearning
Yeah.
for something better, that hope that we can reclaim what's been lost.
It's like a flicker of green in this sea of brown and gray, a reminder that even when faced with desolation, there's still beauty, there's still life, if we're brave enough to fight for it.
Precisely. And that fight, that struggle, that's what resonates with audiences. It taps into our own anxieties about the future, about the fragility of our own world. And yet it also offers this strange sort of hope. It shows us that even when everything seems lost, there's still a spark of humanity in there, this capacity for resilience, for change that can't be extinguished.
It makes you wonder, what would you be willing to fight for? If you were in their shoes, what choices would you make? In a world like that, stripped bare of all its comforts, all its certainties.
It's a question worth pondering, I think. And ultimately, that's the legacy of Mad Max. It's not just about the action, the spectacle, that adrenaline rush. It's about what those things reveal about us, our capacity for great destruction, but also for incredible resilience.
As we leave the wasteland behind us and return to our own world, a world, still grappling with its own set of challenges, I think we're left with this one final thought-provoking question. What do you think the Mad Max films say about humanity's capacity for survival and for change?